Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into the damp, sometimes a little creepy, and definitely musty world of basements. We're going to solve a major homeowner dilemma using the latest diagnostic guidance. We're looking really closely at spaces that face intense seasonal shifts, much like the challenging environment of a Chicago basement, where dealing with frequent humidity is just, well, it's a fact of life.
So let's just ask the million-dollar question right up front. Is installing one of those massive pieces of machinery an absolute necessity, or is it total overkill for your home? Look, homeowners constantly grapple with this, right? You absolutely want to protect your foundation and your family's air quality, for sure. But you also don't want to over-engineer a solution and waste thousands of dollars if you don't actually need to. So let's unpack exactly how to make this call.
Okay, let's get into the mechanics of this damp basement dilemma. Basements are naturally prone to acting like, well, giant wet crawl spaces. And that's due to intense seasonal swings and the simple fact that ground-level spaces fundamentally retain water. It's just the nature of subterranean architecture. The ground surrounding your foundation holds moisture, and as the seasons shift, that moisture desperately wants to migrate inside. So, the most important factor here isn't just whether or not you have a basement, but rather what your specific basement is doing with that moisture over time. 50 to 60%, honestly, that is the critical relative humidity threshold you literally need to memorize. If your basement consistently creeps above this mark, you are entering the danger zone. Now, spiking above this temporarily during some massive rainstorm, that's one thing. But if your lower level is holding tight above this percentage on a daily basis, you're basically creating the perfect microclimate for a whole host of really expensive problems. Section 1. When to say yes. Let's play basement doctor and diagnose the severe symptoms of a damp basement. If your basement is exhibiting any of these symptoms, especially things like recurring mold, lingering odors, or condensation, it is crying out for a heavy, dewy, systemic solution. You really want to pay close attention to damp drywall or condensation that's actively forming on your walls and windows. And even worse, if you notice wet crawl space-like behavior down there, even when it isn't actively flooding from rain, yeah, that is a massive red flag. Notice this stark contrast between these two scenarios. You really only need heavy machinery when the moisture load is spread out across the entire footprint, not when it's just isolated to a single drafty corner. Basically, if you've got a high moisture load across multiple rooms, the whole house system is going to be your best friend. But if your dampness is totally localized to one specific closet, or maybe just a single problem wall facing a poorly drained garden bed, a massive whole house system might be jumping the gun. Now, a whole house system is highly effective in those widespread scenarios because it treats the air right at the source. It moves it efficiently right through your home's ductwork. And this is the major advantage, right? It totally saves you from that tedious daily chore of emptying a fleet of portable dehumidifier buckets, room by room, over and over again. It just operates quietly in the background, giving you uniform moisture control across the entire footprint of your basement. Section 2. When to say no. Finding relief for your wallet by treating localized issues. If you've already mastered the basics, your gutter drainage is good, your sump pump is functioning, and your humidity is stable, a giant dehumidifier is honestly just unnecessary. Think about your preventative maintenance for a second. Have you addressed the exterior grading so water actually flows away from the house? Is your sump pump functioning flawlessly? Have you sealed obvious cracks? Because if you've done all that, you have no visible microbial growth or weird smells, and any minor issues vanish with a simple spot treatment, you're already winning the moisture battle. Your strong existing ventilation strategy is likely doing its job perfectly. In fact, forcing a massive unit into a well-managed space isn't just a waste of money, it can actually completely mess up your home's delicate airflow balance. Think about it. You're introducing a major new appliance into an HVAC ecosystem that just doesn't need it. This creates entirely redundant operating costs on your electricity bill, and worse, it can throw your home's carefully tuned ventilation strategy completely out of whack. Section 3. The prescription. We're going over the 1-week test to diagnose your own basement. Let's see how all of this builds into a really actionable, real-world prescription that you can literally start today. The 1-week test. Step 1 is super straightforward. Just get a reliable hygrometer and place it in the basement. Step 2 requires a little patience, though. You need to measure the humidity for at least a week, and ideally, you want to do this across different weather conditions, like, say, a sunny stretch followed by a heavy downpour, just to see how your basement naturally reacts. And then step 3, watch closely for any physical signs of moisture damage. During that week of testing, you are looking for this specific baseline. If your readings frequently push past 50 to 55%, your case for a whole house unit gets much, much stronger. This 50 to 55% range is what we call the comfort target. You really have to pay attention to the patterns here, not just one isolated reading on a rainy Tuesday. If the trend line consistently hovers above this comfort target, your basement is basically trying to alert you to a systemic issue. Alongside that data, you also need to actively hunt for the physical fallout of high humidity. I'm talking about peeling paint or smells that stubbornly return no matter how hard you scrub. Have you noticed your baseboards starting to warp or kind of pull away from the wall? Is there recurring condensation fogging up the basement windows? These physical indicators mean the humidity isn't just hanging out in the air anymore. It is actively degrading the building materials of your actual home. Section 4. The final verdict. Making your choice based on actual data.
The choice ultimately boils down to this balanced view. Say yes to treating widespread chronic moisture, and say no if your preventative measures are already doing the heavy lifting. If your monitoring proves that your humidity is well controlled and the only issues are localized to one tiny spot that you've already addressed, you can safely skip the heavy machinery.
So the golden rule basically boils down to this. Ditch the guesswork entirely. Base your decisions solely on measured humidity trends and the actual signs of moisture damage you were seeing with your own eyes. This dual approach is vastly more reliable than just, guessing and hoping for the best. So take a walk downstairs tonight, look closely at the walls, check the air, and ask yourself, is your basement begging for a systemic intervention or just a little localized TLC? Your house is already telling you exactly what it needs. The only question is, are you listening?